as well as watching live the Breakfast Show coming to you from Pure Africa TV. A very good morning. Join me in the Breakfast Show. Remember, today is the 27th of the month of April. Of course, the year is 2022. The year is 2022. Join me in the Breakfast Show. Remember, in the first bit of the show, as usual, we'll be interacting. As usual, at the first bit of the Breakfast Show is such an interactive bit. What you need to do is to let me know where you are already tuned in from, where you are watching from, where you are listening from, and actually through which particular platform are you able to follow this particular show coming to you from Pure Africa TV and at the same time from Pure Africa Radio. Remember, all our social media platforms are already open. Of course, in our social media platforms, fan page, Facebook is Pure Africa TV, YouTube Pure Africa TV, Twitter at Pure Africa TV. Remember, the hashtag right now is the Breakfast Show. So you tweeting hashtag is Pure Breakfast Show at Pure Africa TV. Remember, it's also good that you get to have your Pure Africa TV official app. That is the PATV official app. I tell you, having that particular application, you'll be able to drop your comments at the comment section, and I'll be getting them, especially during the first bit of the show, and of course I'll be reading them out even as we continue with the show. Meanwhile, in the second bit of the show, as usual, we'll be tackling politics. We get to the world of entertainment, business, of course. Remember, we'll also be looking at some of the sections and subsections, especially at the county section, just to see what is transpiring from our county level and from our village and local level. That will be that is the schedule for the second bit of the show and third bit of the show. As usual, we will be tackling a given subject of study, that which is of public interest, of course, that which is treated to be having a lot of impact in the society. And today, we'll be talking about the issues of nominations and party primaries. Remember, the deadline that was, of course, given by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission was the second day of the month of May. During that day, or upon that day, every political party ought to have submitted the name or presented the name of all those qualified running mates, or not really running mates, but those that have seen the favor of the nominations for various political parties, for various political positions. And so right now you realize that each and every political party is trying to catch up with that fixed deadline, of course, by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, just to ensure that upon reaching 2nd of May, everything is set, and of course all the candidates or nominated candidates have already presented their names. Of course, during the third bit of the show, I'll be asking you as to whether you've seen a free and fair nomination or party primaries in your region or in your political party. Of course, there are those who are strongly attached to a given political party. Yet again, you can see the movement, or especially as far as the nomination exercise and the party primaries have been conducted. Now, the big question is, has it been free and fair? Even now, as we are approaching the deadline. Remember, that is what we'll be talking about when we get to the third bit of this particular show. Of course, this is the Breakfast Show live from Pure Africa TV, Pure Africa Radio. My name is Evans Odiambo. Remember to follow us in all our social media platforms. Of course, Facebook, our fan page is Pure Africa TV, Twitter at Pure Africa TV, hashtag a Breakfast Show. Remember also to get to download our official app. Of course, that is the Pure Africa TV official app. What you need to do is simple. Just get to your Google Play Store. Of course, you have your Android smartphone there. Type PATV official app. And I tell you, I promise you will get our Pure Africa TV official app there at the first option. What you need to do is just to download it. Once you have it as an app in on your Android smartphone there, of course, you'll be able to follow all the live shows and programs coming to you both from Pure Africa TV and at the same time from Pure Africa Radio. Not just that, remember, you'll be getting the latest updates of information both from Pure Africa TV and at the same time from Pure Africa Radio. And so having that particular application will be such a friendly platform for you. You'll not be left behind. Remember, information is power, and so get your Pure Africa TV official app, be powerful. We are getting to the first bit of this particular show because during the first bit is such an interactive bit of the show. My name is Evans Odhiambo. Join me in the Breakfast Show as the Breakfast Show begins. Show coming to you live from Pure Africa TV, Pure Africa Radio. Remember, it is the first beat of this particular show, and during the first beat, I'll go through the comment section, of course, just to see those that are already tuned in to the Breakfast Show, of course, live from Pure Africa TV, Pure Africa Radio. And of course, going by my comment section, I see Phyllis Locke already tuned. Thank you very much, saying good morning, Evans. Good morning, Phyllis. Thank you very much for choosing Pure Africa TV. Thank you very much for choosing the Breakfast Show. Of course, that is Owino Victor. Thank you very much, already tuned in all the way from Homa Bay County. Thank you very much, Sir Philip, already tuned in all the way from Kisaku Secondary School. Of course, Awiko Chogo. I see you already tuned in all the way from Beta Sub-County in Homa Bay County. Thank you very much for choosing Pure Africa TV. Of course, Owen Commander, I see you already tuned in all the way from Nax, Vegas, Nakuru City. Remember, you can as well drop your comments, especially during the first bit of the show as we interact before we can get to the second bit of the show. Meanwhile, remember, we're getting to the second bit of this particular show because we'll talk about politics. Of course, we look at the world of politics, we look at the world of business. Talking about the world of business, of course, you realize that the price of maize, of course, has rapidly increased, has highly increased. That which has even affected the prices of the animal feed. Remember, these are some of the stories that we'll be touching when we get to the second bit of the show, especially during the business section. We'll dwell on the prices, of course, of various stuffs, food stuffs, and other commodities, of course, that have been seen to be rising in prices day in, day out. Of course, we'll also be talking about some of the stories that are seen to be unfolding in our various county levels. Of course, those that are transferring from the village levels, those that are transferring from the local levels. Remember, Pure Africa TV is your destination is your choice of destination for both local content as well as international content. Not just international and local content. Remember, you need the international entertainment, you get it here. You need the local entertainment, you get it here. So you are just in the right place, you are just in the right time. Thank you very much for joining me. Of course, Jamasi, I see you live from Narok County. Thank you very much. Of course, Rune Lane also tuned in all the way from Narok County. Thank you very much, Emilia Tieno. I see you already tuned in all the way from Nairobi County. Of course, that is the capital city. Talking about Nairobi County, especially today, you begin to remember the gubernatorial race. Very tough race for a very tough race for within the Nairobi City County. Remember, we also saw Governor Anne Kananu dropping from that particular race, of course, dropping down or dropping out of the race, or stepping out of the race to support Polycarp Igathe, that who was nominated, of course, by the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition. But it is not safe for Igathe, because as we see, there's a very tough competition now between Polycarp Igathe and Senator Johnson Sakaja. Of course, Sakaja was given the ticket for the UDA party, of course, United Democratic Alliance Party. So, talking about the nomination or talking about the gubernatorial race in Nairobi City County, it is such a tough race. Of course, it is you who is the voter. It is you as the Kenyan citizen, especially resident of Nairobi City, of course, county, to decide the fate of them. Of course, it is you who will decide who will get to that office or who will fail to get to that particular office. Remember, those are some of the stories that I'm just touching on lightly, but getting to the second bit of the show will exhaust them to the latter. Also, of course, yesterday we saw the MPs now count on Kibaki's achievement as the country mourns the death of the late President Mwai Kibaki. Of course, we saw achievements after achievements being mentioned, of course, especially those that worked with the President Mwai Kibaki. Remember, President Mwai Kibaki has a record of history because he is the long-serving member of Parliament. And of course, that remains a record, of course, historical record. President Mwai Kibaki, now the late President Mwai Kibaki, was the long-serving, or as the record of the long-serving member of Parliament. Of course, looking at some of the stories that we'll be talking about. Of course, these are the top news stories that we'll tackle during the second bit of the show. Shortly before we'll get to the newspapers, of course, we also see Raila now chooses a committee of 7 people ahead of deciding the fate of the running mate. Remember, the fate of running mate has been such a contentious motion. Running mate has been such a debatable motion. Of course, each and every political party, each and every political coalition coming up with their own ways of conducting or of deciding on who is the best suitable running mate for their presidential flag bearer. Now we see in Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition, ODM leader, who is also the flag bearer for Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition, has now come up with a committee, of course, of 7 individuals who are tasked with deciding who is the suitable running mate. Remember, I'll be mentioning names of those members, of the members of that particular committee when we get to the second bit of the show. Remember, these are some of the stories that we'll be talking about when we get to the second bit of the show. Meanwhile, we're in the first bit of the show, and as usual, in the first bit of the show, we would always interact. And so, let me know where you are already tuned in from, where you are watching from, of course, where you are following the breakfast show from, of course, live from Pure Africa TV, Pure Africa Radio. Thank you very much. Going by the comment section, I see Madam Melody already tuned in all the way from Mount Kenya University, Thika campus. Thank you very much, of course, for choosing the Breakfast Show, for choosing Pure Africa TV, Pure Africa Radio. Keti Segano already tuned in. Thank you very much, of course, for choosing the Breakfast Show. Of course, getting to the second bit of the show, some of the stories that we'll be looking at. Of course, we see the gubernatorial hopefuls, of course, in Nairobi City County now receive their UDA tickets. We saw Anne Waiguru receiving it. We saw Aisha Juma receiving it. Of course, Johnson Sakaja also receiving the UDA party ticket. And also that lets you know that there's a very stiff competition. There's a very tough race, especially in the Nairobi City County. Not just in Nairobi City County, but even in other counties, of course. Remember, Nairobi City County is one that is right now reflected to be having a very tough or very stiff competition. But not just Nairobi, because you can see also in other counties of Homa Bay County included, of course, that those who are going with because those standing as independent candidates competing those that were able to receive the party ticket for various political parties. Of course, talking about the month of April, you begin to think about the party primaries, you begin to think about nomination. But the big question has been, are they free and fair? They free and fair. Remember, getting to the third bit of the show, because the Breakfast Show today will be talking about that. You'll be letting me know, of course, going about the nominations. Of course, right now we see the political parties, of course, rushing to complete the entire exercise and give the tickets to those members or to those particular candidates who deserve those particular tickets before the second day of the month of May. The month of May of 2022. That which is treated as the deadline actually before those particular candidates present their names to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. But looking at your political party, you as a viewer, you as a Kenyan citizen, you as a voter, do you see the nomination being done in a free and fair way? If it is free, how? And if it is not free, why? Remember, this is what we'll be talking about when we get to the third bit of the show. You'll be sharing with me whether it has been done a free and fair way, issuance of the tickets, whether it is being done a free and a fair way. If it is done in a free and fair way, you'll be telling me why or how. When it is unfair and unfree, but how? Of course, you'll get to share with me. Right now, you can begin commenting. Of course, you can begin dropping your comments. Remember, you can as well drop your comment via our WhatsApp number. The number is 0796840560. Your comment, I'll be getting the real time, shouting it out in the real time, of course, as we continue with the show. My name is Evans Odhiambo. Remember to follow us, of course, you can through Twitter or Twitter hashtag is the Breakfast Show. Twitter, we are there, Pure Africa TV, hashtag Breakfast Show. Currently, you'll be finding us there. Of course, you'll be getting your comments, shouting them out in the real time. My name is Evans Odhiambo, taking a very short break, but soon we'll be back. Then as we move to the second bit of this particular show. But before we get to the second bit of the show, after this break, I'll be back to look at some of the comments, of course, in the comment section, so that we move together even as we go to the second bit of the show. A very good morning. Join me and continue staying with you. This is the Breakfast Show, live from Pure Africa TV, Pure Africa Radio. My name is Evans Odhiambo, taking a very short break. Soon I'll be back with much more. this is the Breakfast Show live from Pure Africa TV, Pure Africa Radio. My name is Evans Odhiambo. Right now we are getting to the second beat of the show. Because getting the second beat of the show, remember this is where we get to look at some of the top news stories. Of course, those particular stories that are given a lot of significance. Those particular stories that are given a lot of weight. But after that, immediately we'll be getting to the newspapers, of course, to review some of the newspapers. Of course, remember, you realize that in our newspapers today, there are a lot of emphasis, especially on the world of politics. And just to let you know that we have the Star newspaper, we have the Daily Nation, of course, we have the Standard. Of these particular newspapers, will be looking at them, of course, to review them and to get the details of these particular newspapers as per various sections and various sub-sections of these particular newspapers. Of course, remember, we'll be looking at the politics section, we'll be looking at the business section, we'll be looking at a bit of the sports, of course, entertainment. Remember, we'll also be getting to the county section to see some of the top stories, or to see some of the stories that are transferring from our county level. Of course, that is the schedule for the second bit of this particular show. But getting to the third bit of the show, today I'll be asking you as to whether, right now the political parties are rushing, to complete this entire exercise of party primaries and party nominations. Of course, issuers of tickets. Remember yesterday, those who failed to receive their tickets, of course, in the UDA party, they will be getting their tickets today. But among some individuals, or among those particular candidates who received their tickets, remember Governor Anne Mumbi Waiguru, of course, received her ticket, of course, ahead of the Kirinyaga gubernatorial race. And of course, we saw Johnson Sakaja, Senator Johnson Sakaja, the current Nairobi senator, or Nairobi County senator, receiving his UDA ticket to go for the Nairobi gubernatorial seat. Of course, he'll be facing a very stiff competition from Polycarp Igathe. Polycarp Igathe, of course, had received his ticket the other day from the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition. And so during the third bit of the show, I'll be asking you as to whether going by the various regions and going by the various political parties, especially that which you belong to as a Kenyan citizen, that which you belong to as a voter, do you see this particular exercise, do you see that this particular exercise has been done in a free and fair way? Is it fair and square? Because you'll get to share with me when we get to the third bit of the show. Meanwhile, we are in the second bit of the show, and as usual, we'll begin with some of the top news stories, of course, those that are given weight, especially in the breakfast show. Looking at some of the stories we have today, those that are given weight, now we see MPs count on Kibaki's achievement as the country mourns the late President Mwai Kibaki. Of course, we saw a good number of parliamentarians. Of course, we saw the legislators yesterday in the National Assembly. Remember, they were called from a recess just to come back and pay their last respects, of course, to mourn together with the country as far as President Mwai Kibaki, the late President Mwai Kibaki, is concerned. Of course, we saw a good number of legislatures giving a bit of their history, of course, how they have known the late President Mwai Kibaki. Of course, we also saw some who had worked with him under various sections and various subsections, of course, in various departments, including Garissa Township Member of Parliament Eden Duale, of course, also paying his last tributes to the late President Mwai Kibaki. Of course, we saw Dede Nyoro. Dede Nyoro is the Member of Parliament of the legislature for Kiaru sub-county, or Kiaru constituency. Of course, we saw Dede Nyoro talking about the growth of economy and relating this to Kibaki, not just Ndindi Nyoro himself, because talking of the economy, we've seen a lot of parliamentarians, we've seen a lot of leaders, we've seen a lot of residents, of course, those from the Othaya home of the late President Mwai Kibaki, saying that the late president really contributed to the growth of the economy. And now let's look at some of the achievements, of course, some of the attributes that were being made in reference to now the late President Stanley Emilio Mwai Kibaki. Of course, we see the issue of decency being mentioned, the issue of decency being mentioned in the National Assembly. Of course, yesterday, that President Mwai Kibaki was such a decent leader. If you come to dressing and other language and many other areas, of course, the issue of decency. Then remember President Mwai Kibaki as the record of the long-serving member of parliament, of course, in Kenya. Then we see free primary education, not one legislator, not two legislatures, not three, but the issue of free and primary education can be talked over and over again, or can be emphasized and reiterated on over and over again as far as the achievements of the late President Mwai Kibaki is concerned. Also, we saw MPs, a good number of MPs and legislatures, of course, saying that President Mwai Kibaki really contributed a lot as far as free primary education is considered. Of course, we see they also brought eloquent debates in National Assembly. Of course, this was a point that was being centered on once again in the National Assembly yesterday, as the parliamentarians, of course, as the legislators were paying their last respects and, of course, giving the achievements of the late President Mwai Kibaki. Of course, we see the issue of infrastructure being mentioned again, that President Mwai Kibaki contributed a lot to the construction of infrastructural developments and construction of various roads during his tenure. Of course, to be specific, Thika Super Highway was mentioned, that which was constructed during the tenure of the late President Mwai Kibaki. Also, we saw a team of women, of course, led by Denita Gatti, saying that President Mwai Kibaki really contributed a lot, especially to the development of a woman, and really supported women in various levels, or at various levels. Of course, we saw Denita Gatti referring to the Maendeleo ya Wanawake development. Maendeleo ya Wanawake said that President Mwai Kibaki was really focused as far as women woman gender was considered, or is being considered. Also, we saw that a lot of contributions, a lot of attributes, of course, positive contributions that are being of course, related to the late President Mwai Kibaki. And so you, as a citizen, of course, these were some of the contributions from the parliamentarians, these are some of the contributions from the legislators. But you, as a Kenyan citizen, you as a voter, of course, who was served by President Mwai Kibaki, how do you remember the late President Mwai Kibaki? Even now that the country is mourning, now that the country is paying the last respect to the late President Emilio Stanley Mwai Kibaki. Of course, remember that the condolence books are spread all over. Of course, at the state departments of various counties. Of course, you can get to your county level, any state office. Of course, you will get the condolence book, of course, to write as you as well join the country in paying your last respect to the fallen President Mwai Kibaki. Remember, the cabinet interior, the cabinet minister for interior just confirmed that the burial programs are complete. Of course, that the burial programs are complete. This was a confirmation from the Interior Cabinet Secretary, Dr. Fred Matiang'i, who confirmed that burial programs are complete. Of course, the service is being scheduled to be held in Nyayo. The burial ceremony service is being scheduled to be held in Nyayo Stadium or Nyayo Sports Ground, of course, beginning from exactly 8 o'clock in the morning. And of course, this particular exercise will be led by the KDF when it will come to that. Remember, the body, after final viewing to yesterday in the Parliament buildings, the body was transported back to Lee Funeral Home. Then there later on Friday, of course, tomorrow, the body will be taken to or transported to Nyayo Sports Grounds, where the service will be done, where the burial service will be done, as leaders and other members, even the members of the public included, will be paying their last respect to President Mwai Kibaki. Of course, the burial service will be there. Of course, we see Cabinet Minister or Cabinet Secretary for Interior, Dr. Fred Matiang'i, is saying that the family members or the of course, some of the conditions set by the family members must be paid attention to. And remember, President Mwai Kibaki will be offered a state burial, Of course, the entire process of the burial and the burial activities will be led by the Kenya Defence Forces, of course. We saw the Interior Cabinet Secretary saying that it's now time that whatever directive that will be given by the KDF, be considered. And so that will be it real tomorrow in Nyayo Sports Ground of Nyayo Stadium, of course, tomorrow. Remember, there is also an urge that you as a public who like to get to Nyayo Stadium tomorrow, to Nyayo Sports Ground tomorrow, to look at this particular or to witness how this particular burial service or the ceremony will be conducted. You are urged to get there as early as possible, especially to be specific by 8 o'clock in the morning, so that when the entire exercise will begin, you will be around, of course, as a witness of the ceremony. Remember, during that particular time, you will be as well paying your last respect to the late President Emilio Mwai Kibaki before he will be laid to rest on Saturday, of course, the 30th of the month of April 2022. And aside from this particular story of the late President Mwai Kibaki, now let's switch focus and look at the next top story, of course, that which has been given away today in the breakfast show. Of course, we see Raila now chooses a committee of 7 ahead of the running mate vetting. Now we see the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition presidential flag bearer, and as well ODM leader Raila Amolo Odinga now has settled on a committee of 7 members tasked with the duty of deciding the fate of the running mate. Of course, looking at the committee, you realize among the members of the committee are Bishop Peter Njega, of course. There we have Senator Enoch Wambua, we have Dr. Noah Wekesa, we have Sheikh Mohammed Khalifa. At the same time, we have Beatrice Askur Moya. At the same time, of course, those are some of the members of that particular committee who have been tasked with the responsibility of deciding who is the suitable running mate for the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition flag bearer Raila Amolo Odinga. Of course, at the same time, we see a section of women now proposing or pushing for NARC Kenya party leader, of course, Martha Karua, that she is the suited running mate. She is the most suitable running mate for Raila Amolo Odinga. But remember, this particular or the fate of the running mate will be decided by the committee members, of course, a committee of 7 who will actually come to settle on that particular issue. And of course, we see that during that particular time, this committee will get the most qualified candidate. Of course, this is a statement that was made by the Secretary General for Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition, John Rebo Junet Mohammed, who said that the candidate to be settled on, must be the most qualified, of course, as far as various conditions. Some of the conditions are concerned. The candidate must be honest, the candidate must be committed, especially when it comes to delivering to the public. The candidate must be a committed fellow as far as public duties are concerned. And of course, we see women pushing for Karua, of course, NARC Kenya Party leader, to be the best. But remember, earlier on, there are some of the members that were being proposed, to be the suitable parliaments, of which one of the candidates was, or this particular suitable candidate was to be picked from that particular list. Of course, we saw a list of 5 individuals, or 5 leaders. Of course, all of them are allied to the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition. Of course, looking at the list, we saw the Wiper Party leader Kalonzo Musyoka was there, the NARC Kenya Party leader Martha Karua was there. Of course, we saw the Agriculture Cabinet Secretary Peter Munya is there, former Gatundu Member of Parliament Peter Kenneth was also being mentioned, and finally we saw Alias Sanjo, who is the Mombasa County governor for Mombasa County, also in that particular list. But now it's a matter of time. The publics, of course, the citizens will get to wait. Remember, the deadline for proposing, or the deadline for presentation of the names of the name of the running mate will be on 16th of the month of May, of course, 2022. That is according to the condition set by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, not just to the presidential running mates, but as well to the gubernatorial running mates. And so each and every presidential flag bearer, each and every gubernatorial flag bearer is being looked forward to presenting his running mate or her running mate before or on 16th May 2022. Remember, these are some of the tight schedules and tight programs, tight schedules that are being made ahead of the 2022 general election. Of course, just 4 months ahead to the 9th August 2022 general election. And so all the members, of course, we see now citizens are eyeing, of course, are looking forward, are eagerly waiting to hear, or looking forward to seeing who will be the best suited candidate to fit in the running mate position, both for the Azimio la Umoja flag bearer, of course, Raila Amolo Odinga, and at the same time for Kenya Kwanza flag bearer, of course, who also happens to be the Deputy President of Kenya, Dr. William Ruto. Remember, on the side of Kenya Kwanza, there are also some proposals, especially from members of the public, or members that are allied to various political parties, members that are allied to various political leaders. Of course, we saw a section of residents from the Western region, proposing that Musalia Mudavadi, or the ANC party leader Musalia Mudavadi, is the best suited for the position of a running mate, especially for Deputy President William Ruto come that time, of course, the 16th May, when the name of the running mate shall be presented to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Of course, at the same time, we saw the same time reactions from various members that are allied to various political parties. Of course, we also saw earlier on, even threats that should Mudavadi not be settled on, then there is likely to be division, or some section likely to divide. Of course, the other day we also saw from the Kakamega Senator Cleophas Malala, saying that they had agreed that the western part will really reap a lot from the Kenya Kwanza government should Deputy President William Ruto clinch to the top seat, of course, to the presidency. Those are some of the issues and some of the statements, of course, as far as the particular contentious subject of the running mate is being concerned. As far as this particular contentious subject of the running mate is being concerned, and still closely related to that, of course, we see the gubernatorial hopefuls receive their UDA tickets. Of course, those that are allied to UDA allied to United Democratic Alliance Party now receiving their tickets. Yesterday, of course, we saw this whereby Governor Anne Mumbi Waiguru, of course, received her ticket ahead of the Kirinyaga gubernatorial race. At the same time, we saw Aisha Jumwa receiving a ticket ahead of the Kilifi gubernatorial race, and at the same time, we saw Johnson Sakaja, Senator Johnson Sakaja, receiving his UDA ticket ahead of the Nairobi City County gubernatorial race. And at the same time, we saw also Bishop Margaret Wanjiru also receiving a ticket for the Nairobi senatorial race. Remember, these particular individuals will get now to face their opponents from this other side of the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition in such a tough race. And of course, it's you as the Kenyan citizen, it's you as a voter to decide the fate of who shall get to secure that particular position, of course, that particular political position. Others, of course, are said to receive their UDA party tickets today. Others, especially those that did not receive their tickets yesterday, they are set to receive their party tickets today. Remember, all this information will be delivering to you in the real time. We'll be telling you in the real time, of course, so that you get to know how this particular exercise is ongoing. But remember, today in the third bit of the show, I'll be asking you whether it has been free and fair. If you are saying it has been free and fair, of course, give a reason. If you are saying it has not that been free and fair, you as well give a reason in our comment section, especially when we get to the third bit of the show, such a participatory bit of the breakfast show. Because others are set to receive their tickets today on Thursday. Of course, we'll get to let you know as soon as they will be receiving their tickets, of course, for the UDA, or the United Democratic Alliance Party. And moving forward, remember the various political parties, various coalitions are now trying to push so that they fit to the set deadline for that particular exercise of presenting the names of those that have received tickets for various political parties for their presentation to the IEBC, or Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Remember that particular deadline is the 2nd May. 2nd May to present the names of those that have been nominated to such positions, especially for the senators, women representatives, for the position of senators, women representatives, members of county assemblies. Exceptions are the governors as well as the presidential candidates. Remember, presidential candidates and their running mates shall present their names to the IEBC latest 16th day of the month of May 2022. And at the same time, the governors will present the names of their running mates to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission on latest or on or before 16th day of the month of May, of course, 2022. And closely related to that, again, we see now Governor Kananu. Kananu steps down from the tight Nairobi gubernatorial race, because the race is very tight. The race is that which is accompanied with a lot of competition, of course, with a very stiff competition. Now we see Governor Anne Kananu stepping down, but why? Of course, she has stepped down. Remember Governor Anne Kananu is the current governor for Nairobi County. Even as we speak today, is the current governor for Nairobi City County. But remember, Kananu was also in that particular race where we saw, where we see now Senator Johnson Sakaja. We now see Polycarp Igathe, among many others. Of course, a majority of them never received their party's ticket. Remember, before the party tickets were, of course, but the various political parties, or before tickets were given, we just saw a good number of people showing their interest, or a good number of contestants showing their interest for that particular position. But later we saw others getting the favor of the ticket, or the favor of the ticket, of course, the favor of nomination by receiving the tickets. Meanwhile, others did not get the ticket. Of course, it is upon them now to decide their fate, especially considering that the deadline for presentation to the IEBC is on 2nd day of the month of May. And so they are to present their names. Whether they are going as independent candidates, they will present. And so before the issuance of tickets, we saw that Nairobi City County had a lot of competitors eyeing the gubernatorial race, but now we've seen with the nomination, there's been a limit. Of course, they are now limited. They are now limited, especially going by the nomination or considering the nomination. Of course, you can remember that Bishop Margaret Wanjiru was also eyeing that particular position, but now she received the ticket to go for the senatorial seat, of course, for that particular county, But now Governor Kananu has stepped down to support Polycarp Igathe. Remember, Polycarp Igathe was nominated by the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya, or nominated by the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition, and has received that particular ticket. And so Kananu has stepped down to support Polycarp Igathe. Remember, Polycarp Igathe will be facing Senator Johnson Sakaja of UDA party in that particular competition. Of course, it is a very stiff competition. It's such a stiff race, especially as far as the Nairobi city is concerned. Remember, these are some of the top news stories that were given a lot of emphasis today in the second bit of this particular show. But soon we are getting to the newspapers. Of course, we'll be looking at various sections. We'll be looking at various subsections of these particular newspapers, of course, to see what is transpiring, what is coming up from various regions of the countries. Of course, what are some of the stories that are given emphasis today in the breakfast show. We'll get to look at the newspapers, of course, just to let you know that we have the Star newspaper, we have the Daily Nation newspaper, we have the Standard newspaper. Of course, we'll be looking at them as per various sections, because the political section, the business section, of course, the county section as well. We'll get to look at it as well. Meanwhile, this is the breakfast show live from Pure Africa TV, Pure Africa Radio. Remember, you can drop to us your comments via our social media platforms. Of course, Facebook, our fan page is Pure Africa TV, Instagram Pure Africa TV, Twitter at Pure Africa TV, hashtag breakfast show. I'll be getting your comments. Of course, I'll be reading it in real time event as we continue. And today, getting to the third bit of the show, I'll be asking you as to whether the nominations at the party primaries have been conducted in a free and fair way, especially looking at your political party, or looking at that particular political party you belong to, or looking at your region, looking at various political positions in that your county, in that your sub-county, or even to the national level. You can as well drop your comments via WhatsApp number. Of course, the number is 0796840560. I'll be getting your comment the real time. Of course, I'll be reading it when we get to the third beat of the show, such a participatory beat of the show. Meanwhile, continue staying with me. My name is Evans Odhiambo. Taking a very short break, but coming after, we'll be getting to the newspapers to review it. Do not miss this. Continue staying with me. Right, welcome back. Remember, this is the Pure Africa TV. This Pure Africa TV, of course, this is the breakfast show live from Pure Africa TV, Pure Africa Radio. My name is Evans Odiambo. Remember, we're in the second bit of this particular show. Of course, earlier on we've seen the top news stories, but now let's focus our attention on the newspapers. Of course, we want now to review the newspapers, and right here I have the Star newspaper. And looking at the top, or looking at the front page of this particular newspaper, of course, we see, without me, Raila will lose to Ruto. That's Kalonzo Musyoka. See, the Wiper Party leader has spoken. Without me, Raila will lose to Ruto. Remember, this sentiment comes at a time that Azimio la Umoja, One Kenya Coalition, or to be specific, the flag bearer Raila Amolo Odinga has decided on a council of 7 members to decide on who will be the most suitable candidate to be his running mate. Of course, Kalonzo Musyoka is on that list among others. Of course, remember also Martha Karua is in that big list. We see Peter Kenneth, who is the former Gatanga Member of Parliament, also in that particular list. Of course, we see Peter Monya, the Agriculture Cabinet Secretary, also in that particular list. And also we see Andy Asanjo, of course, also in that particular list. But what does Kalonzo say? Without me, Raila will lose to Ruto. And so remember, this can also be related to the Wiper Party leaders' past sentiments, especially as far as the issue of running mates, or as far as the subject of running mate is being concerned. Remember the other day addressing the members of the Fourth Estate, saying that there are some statements that are always obvious, especially considering this particular subject of the running mate. And earlier on, we saw some of the conditions set, of course, some of them being that the Kalonzo being not being the running mate, or Kalonzo not being settled as the running mate, then they would not work with Raila. Those past conditions. But now the Wiper boss speaks again. Without me, Raila will lose it to the Ruto. Of course, that is the story that is captured here in the front page of the Star newspaper. Moving forward to the next paper, to the next story, of course, we see Sonko Wiper file objection, the case challenging his Mombasa gubernatorial race. Remember the other day, Sonko received the Wiper ticket. Of course, Mike Mbuvi Sonko received the Wiper ticket to go for the Mombasa gubernatorial race. That particular incident that saw various reactions, of course, coming from various political classes, coming from various political parties, and of course from the public as well. Now, see, former Nairobi Governor Mike Mbuvi Sonko has objected to a case seeking to bar him from vying for Mombasa Governor, saying the court has no power to determine that. Of course, Sonko is trying to challenge that particular case filed to challenge him from vying for Mombasa gubernatorial seat, even after getting a ticket from the Wiper Party, or after being after getting the ticket from the Wiper Party. Of course, we saw Sonko through his lawyers, Jared Magolo and Vincent Omolo, said the High Court does not have any authority to determine the eligibility of the candidates in an election, because that is the mandate of the IEBC. And according to Sonko, that should not be filed to court, but it is the IEBC now to decide the fate of this, especially considering his Mombasa County gubernatorial race. And moving on to the next story, of course, we see now Kibaki promised to support me in 2013, says Kalonzo. Of course, that was another interesting story that is captured in this particular section. Of course, the politics section of the political section. Kibaki promised to support me as his successor, says Kalonzo, of course, in the year 2013. In the year 2013, remember the Wiper Party leader Kalonzo, the Wiper Party leader Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka had worked as Kibaki's deputy president, had worked as a deputy president, the then vice president, had worked as the then vice president for Mwai Kibaki, for the late president Mwai Kibaki. We see now the former vice president Kalonzo Musyoka has revealed that his former president Mwai Kibaki had promised to support him as his successor when he retired in 2013. However, the political dynamics brought about the ICC case against Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, now president and deputy president respectively, altered the plans. But these are some of the sentiments that the Wiper Party boss now says, even as various leaders, even the country at large, now giving their last respect to the late President Mwai Kibaki, as well as giving some of the roles, of course, narrating their story, narrating their various stories, how they have known President Mwai Kibaki. Of course, the Wiper Party leader said that Kibaki had promised to support him for the top seat, of course, after his retirement. That's a story that is also captured here in the Star newspaper. Moving forward, we see Karua will restore Kenya's trust in state, women say. Remember, this particular story was also captured among the top news stories that we had today. It was also captured among the top news stories that we had today, that Karua will restore Kenya's trust in state. Women lobby now tells Raila. Remember, this also comes at a time that a committee of 7 individuals, 7 trusted individuals have been tasked with that particular responsibility of deciding the fate of the running mate. Now we see a section of women in Nairobi now pushing for Karua to receive that particular appointment, especially as far as this particular committee will decide that particular fate. Of course, we see professional women in Nairobi have endorsed NARC Kenya leader Martha Karua as Raila Odinga's running mate. Of course, the women from different sectors said Azimio la Umoja, One Kenya Coalition, as a strong candidate in Karua. And so they say that Karua's candidacy is the strongest of all. But of course, the fate of the running mate will be decided by that particular committee that has been tasked with that particular responsibility. Of course, the women from different sectors said Azimio la Umoja Coalition a strong candidate in Karua in a joint statement was read by policy and research consultant Jerry Kreini on Wednesday. Of course, the women said Azimio presidential candidate should pick Karua. Now they are pushing the ODM leader, of course, there's Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition presidential candidate Raila Amolo Odinga to settle on Karua as his running mate ahead of the 9th August 2022 general election. And moving forward to the next story, of course, we see I am in talks with Wanyonyi, says Sakaja. Of course, Sakaja, who received his ticket yesterday, as the Nairobi City County, for the Nairobi City County gubernatorial race, now says that he is in talks with Tim Wanyonyi. Sakaja has said, of course, that particular day after receiving his ticket from the UDA party, the United Democratic Alliance Party. Nairobi Governor aspirant Polycarp Igathe is likely to face a rough battle after his rival Senator Johnson Sakaja hinted he is in talks with Westlands MP Tim Wanyonyi. Now the Azimio coalition settled on Igathe as the flag bearer in an arrangement that saw Wanyonyi shelve his bid. Of course, remember initially Wanyonyi had also shown his interest for that political position, But Sakaja said he had talks with the legislature regarding working together ahead of the general election. Of course, that is also captured in this particular newspaper. Of course, remember this is the Star newspaper. And moving forward, we see even the political analysts now giving the analysis as far as the issue of running mate is concerned, especially for the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition, and just a day after ODM lead as well as the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition flag bearer settling on 7 members of a given committee to decide the fate of the running mate. Here we have Aman Manyora, of course. These are political analysts also giving his analysis on the same. And moving forward to the next story, now we see Oburu in trouble as Senate competitors go to his jugular, because also captured in this particular story. Of course, it will not be a walk in the park on August 9th for airline Pio Buroginga as competitors throng the senatorial race. Remember, Buroginga had also shown his interest for this political position. Of course, the senatorial seat, or the Senate seat. Oburu is one of the beneficiaries of a direct ticket by the Orange Democratic Republic, of course, the ODM. Now, two aspirants who initially angled for the ODM flag bearer flag were aggrieved when the party ticket was given to Oburu Oginga under unclear circumstances, or under circumstances that they term as unclear. Of course, remember the two were Julius Okinda and Tony Yogo, who are running for the Federal Party of Kenya as independent candidates, or as independent respectively. There's a story that is also captured under this particular section. Under this particular section, of course, the politics section, of the political section. And moving forward to the next story, we see now the Kotu Secretary General has now spoken. I prayed for riches as an altar boy. I'm now blessed. That's actually, of course, the Kotu Secretary General. The Central Organization of Trade Union Secretary General Francis Atwoli is a man who needs no introduction. Of course, we've seen Atwoli say that he prayed as an altar boy, and now he is blessed. But now let's look at the story and see the blessings that the Kotu Secretary General is talking about. Of course, musically, no one has ostensibly built Atwoli's love or Atwoli's love for the Congolese rumba. He has parted with a fortune just to have first-hand experience of this genre of music and numerous times. Of course, that is also captured there, also captured in that particular section. Of course, those are some of the stories that were given emphasis under the political section. We're gonna take a very short break, but later we'll be back getting now to the business section. Remember, after the business section, we'll also be getting to the county section, and after the county section, we'll be getting to the third bit of the show. But today, getting to the third bit of the show, of course, the question that I had asked you earlier, of course, the same question is, do you see that the party primaries have been conducted in a free and fair way? If you're saying that they have been free and fair, how you, of course, support with a statement. But if they are not free and fair, but why? Or why do you feel it has not been free and fair? Or why do you feel it has been conducted in the most free and fair way? Remember, that's something that we'll be talking about when we get to the third bit of the show, because whereby I'll be gathering your comments. Of course, I'll be getting your comments and your reactions to that particular subject of discussion, of course, today during the breakfast show in the third bit of the show. Meanwhile, you can drop your comments, of course, through our various comment sections. You are following from you following through our social media platforms, of course. Remember, our fan page is Pure Africa TV, in Facebook, Pure Africa TV, Instagram, Pure Africa TV, Twitter at Pure Africa TV. Remember, the hashtag is the breakfast show. Remember, you can as well drop your comment. You following through our Pure Africa TV official app, you can as well drop your comments in our comment section, that particular application, that particular platform, of course, the Pure Africa TV official app. Of course, your comments I'll be getting when we get to the third bit of the show and the last bit of the show. I'll be reading your comments as we get to the end of the show. Meanwhile, we're in the second bit of the show. Of course, I'm taking a very short break. Coming shortly after this, we will now be getting to the business section, whereby we'll be looking at some of the stories of some of the news that are given weight, especially in that particular section. This is the breakfast show live from Pure Africa TV. My name is Evan Sodiema. Taking a very short break. Coming soon, we'll be looking at the business section. So do not miss that. Continue staying with me. In a short while, I'll be back with much more. live from Pure Africa TV. My name is Evans Odhiambo. Remember, we are now in the second bit of the show, but soon we'll be getting to the third bit of the show. Of course, today, getting to the third bit of the show, a question that I'll be asking you, of course, I'll be gathering your response on that particular question is to whether free and fair nomination has been achieved, even now that the various political parties are now rushing with time or rushing with the set deadline to meet that particular deadline, of course, for presenting the names of those that have been nominated to the IEBC. But before that, let's look at the business section, of course, in the second bit of the show, looking at some of the stories that have been captured under this particular section. Of course, we see now state wars against fuel diversion as another crisis looms. Of course, remember, going by the current situation, remember that fuel crisis is on the rise again, because conducting research from various counties and various sub-counties, remember, you realize that in the last 2 days, just a day before yesterday and yesterday, the fuel insufficiency was on the rise again. And now we see the state now wants against fuel diversion as a fresh crisis looms yet again. Because looking at the story, we see the fuel shortage, which had slightly eased in various parts of the country, could hit previous levels due to insufficient local stocks in the market. Major oil companies and independent dealers are being accused of exporting more than their set quotas to the neighboring countries at the expense of a domestic market. Of course, this is a question that was asked over and over again, because looking at other neighboring countries, you will realize that there is no shortage of fuel. But why just in Kenya? Why just in Kenya? Of course, that was a big question during the first shortage, but currently, see the second phase of this particular shortage is on the rise again. But the state now wants against fuel diversion. So that could it be that maybe some of these particular companies dealing in fuel be selling to the neighboring countries? Then a warning, of course, has been sounded, of course, from the state. That's a story that is captured here in the business section. And moving forward to the next story, of course, we see why Africa cannot be left out in crypto trade. Why do you feel Africa as a continent cannot be left out in the crypto trade? Why do you feel that Africa cannot be left out in the crypto trade? Of course, this revolving around the issues of the cryptocurrencies, also reiterated here on the business section. Of course, we see over the past years, we have witnessed about a boom in the cryptocurrency market, but indeed cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, Ether, Litecoin, and Dogecoin, of course, have received a renewed market interest, with the value of these cryptocurrencies, among others, reaching record levels. Of course, we see the Bitcoin, the obvious leader in the pack, of course, as it hits record levels of up to $67,000 in November 2021, up to $8,000 in January 2020. Of course, the issue of Bitcoin, the crypto trade, also mentioned. But why Africa cannot be left out in the crypto trade, or the dealings in cryptocurrencies, also mentioned in that particular section, of course, the business section. And moving forward, we see now Joe Ogutu now to remain head of Safaricom Foundation as he retires. Joe Ogutu now to remain the head of Safaricom Foundation even as he comes to his, as he retires. That's a story that is also captured here. Of course, we see Safaricom's chief of special project, Joe Ogutu, is set to retire at the end of April after serving the telecommunication for 17 years. Because prior to his retirement, Ogutu was also serving as the acting chief of business development office. He was part of the team that coordinated the company's bid for the second telecommunications license in Ethiopia. Of course, that's also mentioned about the retirement of Joe Ogutu, the former chief of special projects for Safaricom telecommunication. For the Safaricom telecommunication. Of course, we see additionally Ogutu has been the chairperson or the chairman of Safaricom Foundation since the year 2012. While announcing Ogutu's retirement, of course, Safaricom Chief Executive Officer Peter Ndegwa said over the last 2 years he has had the pleasure of working closely with Joe and had come to rely on his advice, candid feedback, and support. Of course, there is also mentioned that, remember, Safaricom is one of the major telecommunication department or telecommunication network in this particular country. And moving forward to the next story, of course, we see now CBK not rationing dollar supply. That's a statement from the bankers. Now they say CBK, Central Bank of Kenya, not rationing dollar supply. Also captured in this particular section, of course, the business section. Of course, going through this particular story, see the Central Bank of Kenya or Kenya Bankers Association, KBA, has refuted claims members have been asked by the regulator to ration dollar supply in the market. Of course, in a statement, the bankers lobby said it is in constant talks with the Central Bank of Kenya, of course, the CBK, to resolve the dollar supply glitch in the market. Of course, that's a statement. This is a story that is also captured here, revolving around the rationing of the dollar supply. Of course, the bankers have spoken. Of course, yesterday we saw the Kenya Association of Manufacturers CAM chairperson Mukai Kihanya saying members are finding it too difficult to mobilize the 100,000 US dollars from local dealers, straining relationships with external supplies. Of course, this is a story that had been now twice reiterated on by the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, simply known as KAM or CAM. Now, these are some of the stories that were captured under this particular section, of course, the business section. But now let's switch gears and look at the county section. Of course, those particular stories that are unfolding and transpiring from various counties or from various sub-counties, as well from the various from our local regions, also captured today in this particular section of the county section. Topping there, we see the Kiambu County. Kiambu County now to upgrade again, of course, this Igegania Hospital to level 5. Of course, that's a good news for the Kiambu residents, of all those particular residents who are directly benefiting from the services of this particular health center, for this particular hospital. Now the Kiambu government is planning to upgrade Igegania level 4 hospital in Gatundu North sub-county to a level 5 hospital facility to enhance service delivery to residents. Of course, we see Governor James Nyoro said his administration is mobilizing funds to rehabilitate the facility and put up requisite amenities for the same. And of course, that's very good news to the residents of Kiambu County. Of course, those that are directly or indirectly benefiting from that particular health facility. And moving forward to the next story, of course, captured under this particular section, the county section, you see poverty couldn't shatter their dreams. Looking at the picture, looking at the image, you see two girls. Poverty couldn't shatter their dreams, because for this particular young ladies, of course, these girls of course, coming Limas Quarter village on the Ugandan border burst into jubilation when two girls scored marks enabling them to join university. Of course, we have the Stella who scored an A- grade, and Rachel who scored B+ in the KCSE examinations, despite the tough conditions of life, despite the tough, despite that unconducive learning environment, despite the poverty, they managed to score such admirable grades. Of course, they are still pushing for their dreams, saying that poverty could not shatter their dreams. Of course, we would wish them all the best even as they continue pursuing their dreams amidst or despite of the challenges that they are facing, especially tough economic challenges. Now moving forward to the next story, of course, under the county section, we see Kisumu County also captured or also featured in this particular section. Really, for traders, as Kisumu offers waiver for repainting premises. Of course, looking at the image, you see the Kisumu County Governor, Professor Peter Anyang' Nyong'o, featured under that particular section. Of course, the Kisumu County government has waived approvals on repainting the premises to encourage owners to paint them ahead of the Free Cities Summit. Of course, the conference is slated for May 17th, or the 17th day of May to 21st day of the month of May. Between 5,000 to 8,000 guests are expected to attend that particular summit. Of course, the city manager, Abel Wanga, in a public notice dated 14th of April 2022, said approvals have been fully waived for the May 2022. Of course, those are some of the good steps or some of the positive steps made for that particular county. Of course, this would highly advantage the market, highly advantage the hawkers and other business persons in that particular county. And of course, moving forward, we see the Turkana also featured. Turkana drought response extended by 2 months yet again. Also a story that has been featured. Remember, there's a very strong drought. There's a very strong drought even as we speak in Turkana County. The international response to the drought in Turkana County has been extended by 2 months as drought devastates lives. Remember, this devastation or this devastating effects has been on the life of the residents, of course, human beings, at the same time the lives of animals and livestock as well. And so it's a very tough for the residents of Turkana County. We see the European Civil Protection and the Humanitarian Aid Operation Drought Response Program is also known as the ASAL Humanitarian Network. Of course, it provides 3 rounds of multi-purpose cash transfers to vulnerable populations in drought-stricken regions. Turkana County not left out as far as Kenya is being concerned. Of course, the drought response is being implemented in 8 of the worst affected counties of Marsabit, Isiolo, Samburu, Turkana, Wajir, Taita Taveta, Garissa, and as well as in Mandera County. Of course, those are some of the 8 drought-stricken counties in Kenya as we talk today. Also featured under this section, of course, in the county section. Now, moving forward, we see little known day schools shine amid drug abuse menace. Little known day school shine amid drug abuse menace, also captured in this particular bit of the show. Of course, the county section, of course, when Education Cabinet Secretary George Magoha hailed the performance of Diangui from Wangura, a little known day school in Kerugoya, of course, in Kirinyaga County, come to light, because Wangura was a student at St. James Kiareta Secondary School in Kirinyaga. Of course, his good performance during the release of 2021 KCSE exam results on Saturday helped him emerge in position 5 under the best performing candidates in the sub-county school category. Because there are also, this goes where they say that there are those small day schools, but they have quite a good performing candidates. And so it's true, it's true, of course, going by the past performance, especially on the recently released KCSE results, and even the KCPE results of those small schools or those day schools, but they are equally doing good. They are equally doing good, of course, giving some of the top candidates as far as such sub-counties, as far as such counties are being concerned. Remember, these are some of the stories that were featured here under the county section. Of course, we've seen a lot emanate from the village levels, of course, from counties and sub-counties. And now, even as we transit to the third bit of this particular show, remember our question remains. Of course, when we get to the third bit of the show, I'll be reading some of the comments that are there in our various comment section, our various platforms for comments. Of course, remember today in the third bit of the show, we'll be asking you as to whether nominations has been done in a free and fair way. The party primaries, have they been conducted in a very free and fair way? Why do you feel it has been free, and why do you feel it has been not fair? Why do you feel it has not been free? Especially looking at that political party you belong to, looking at your county region, looking at your sub-county, and looking at some of the political positions, of course, in your county level, in your sub-county level, or even to the national level. Remember, the submission of the names of those who have been nominated, or the deadline for that particular submission is slated second day of the month of May 2022. And so you realize that political parties, those that had not issued the tickets, are now rushing to get the tickets, especially before the closure of that particular date. But getting to the third bit of the show, I'll be asking you why. Do you feel the nominations and party primaries have been conducted in a free and fair way? Because we see each and every political party has been looking forward to conducting their nominations and party primaries in the most free and fair way. Not just the political parties. Again, we see each and every political contestant to various political positions have been looking forward to seeing a free and fair nomination and party primaries done. But now the question is, even as the political parties are now rushing to catch up with the tight deadline to present the names to the IEBC, do you feel the entire exercise has been conducted in a free and fair way? Remember, though, that is the subject on which I'll be getting your reactions in terms of comments, and I'll be reading your comments, of course, before we come to the end of the breakfast show. Meanwhile, this is the breakfast show live from Pure Africa TV. My name is Evans Odhiambo. Continue staying with me. Taking a very short break, but coming later, we'll be getting to the third bit of the show, of course, getting your comments from various platforms, of course, various comment sections in the various platforms of Pure Africa TV. So you following through our Pure Africa TV official app, remember you can as well drop your comment through that particular app in that particular comment section. Commenting there, I'll be getting your comment, of course. Getting to the third bit of the show, I'll be reading your comment even as we will be coming to an end of the breakfast show. You following through our social media platforms, remember you can as well drop your comment via in our comment section, of course, Pure Africa TV, Facebook. Of course, we are live in Facebook as well. You can drop your comment. Remember, you tweeting, hashtag is the breakfast show. Join me in a short while. I'll be back with much more. Show live from Pure Africa TV. My name is Evans Odhiambo. Remember, we are now in the third and the last bit of this particular show. This is the breakfast show. Of course, today in the last bit of the show, in the third bit of the show, my question to you is, do you feel the various political parties have conducted their party primaries and nominations in the most free and fair way? If you feel they have not done it in the free and fair way, why? Remember, the deadline is approaching. The deadline is just around the corner for the submission of the names of those that have been nominated by those political parties to the IEBC, of course, by second day of the month of May. And yet again, those that have decided to run as independent candidates will also be, presenting their names to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission on latest 2nd May. But do you feel the entire exercise has been done on a free and fair way? Of course, I'm now getting to the comment section to see some of the comments, of course, as far as that particular subject of discussion today and the third bit of the show is concerned. This is Ryle tuned in all the way from Kisumu County, saying that definitely no, because talking about issuance of direct tickets. Of course, the subject of direct ticket is that the issuance of direct tickets, especially by the ODM parties, that which was vehemently opposed by residents or by members of the public that are allied to that political party. Thank you very much, of course, for your comments. Moving forward to the next comment, somehow somebody is just saying some of these. This Brighton Njoguna from Kiambu. saying somehow it has been done on a free and fair way. Somehow it's okay, no reason not given. Of course, moving to the next comment that I see, possibly no. Then of course this Caroline of Kisumu saying partly yes and partly no. Because remember, those are some of the comments, of course, as far as the subject of nomination, the subject of party primaries is being concerned. Today the question has been asked whether you feel it has been done in the most fair way, in the most free way, because you once the nominations will be done, of course, once the presentation of the names shall be done, because they will be presented to the IEBC, Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. They will now get there to face their opponents in a very stiff competition, and you as the Kenyan citizen will get to decide the fate. You will get to decide who will get to that particular office as your governor, as your member of county assembly, as your woman representative, of course, as your senator, as your president as well, and as your governor. Remember, this has been the Breakfast Show live from Pure Africa TV. Thank you very much for staying with me since we began the first beat exactly at 7 o'clock in the AM. You've stayed with me throughout the second beat of it, and now we are here at the third beat of the show. Mine is to wish you a very good day. Remember to join me tomorrow once again in the Breakfast Show live from Pure Africa TV, Pure Africa Radio. My name is Evans Odhiambo. Have a nice day, and remember to stay safe. Bye for now.